And now, a show with inappropriate language, the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and if you haven't been keeping up with snow news, you missed a huge blow to the ski and snowboard worlds. This is the week that we mourn the death of Powder and Snowboarder magazines, and you can't forget Surfer and Bike mags as well. They've all been shut down, and this is so fucking sad, as print has been the lifeblood of these industries forever. Print has built the heroes, told the stories, and created the froth in the fall that gets us all ready for the season. I loved these publications, and I feel terrible for the Dave Reddicks and the Pat Bridges of the world who gave their entire lives to these publications, and I'm guessing they didn't get much more than a phone call letting them know their 30 years of service are over. Hopefully, they at least get 2 weeks for every year they were there. But in this world of corporate America, who knows what's going to happen? Now, as you may or may not know, I have a serious history with Powder. I worked with them a lot during my K2 days, and when I left K2, I pitched them on sponsoring a podcast that I was planning on doing. They were stoked on my idea, saying they had been thinking of doing the exact same thing that I had pitched to them, but they didn't have anybody in-house who could do it, and they asked me to create a podcast for Powder, and they would pay me to do it. So we created the sponsored podcast. Pretty much every detail of the show I handled. I would send them in a file and they would publish it. They wrote a paragraph. That was all they needed to do, and it was very well received. And while we should have been celebrating the collective fruits of our labor with the podcast, that didn't happen because I did not see eye to eye with my contact over at Powder Magazine. This was around the time that the magazine started to become more like the New Yorker and less like the ski magazine I had grown up loving. And since I'm not shy when it comes to giving feedback to the powers that be, I let them know exactly what I thought skiers would want to read about. And they were quick to let me know that the stories that would be published in the future of Powder Magazine would be more worldly, and they were done running articles that were nothing more than jerking off Cody Townsend. This was such a bummer for me. This magazine, that I know for building heroes, didn't think heroes were worthy of building anymore. They thought skiers wanted to read about the editors traveling to Israel. And even though my podcasts were the deepest interviews Powder had with athletes in such a long time, I was constantly getting shit on by the editor. I mean, one time, I asked for feedback on an interview, and my contact there told me that it sounded like I was trying to jerk the guest off through the phone. Those are his exact words. And then the next thing you know, the magazine is running a full page on an article of clothing that you were supposed to be able to wear so you can poop yourself or pee yourself while skiing, and they think that is ski journalism. I was very, very disappointed with the editor and the magazine. Regardless of who I liked or didn't like, I did myself no favors when I was working with Powder Magazine. One of the biggest honors of my career is being able to host the Powder Awards 4 years in a row, and while that was an amazing experience, I think I could have sealed my fate when I introduced the editor as, while he wasn't getting beat up in high school, he was winning a state championship diving tournament. He did not like that, and I totally understand it, but it's true. And the crowd got a big laugh. Anyways, after season 1 of that podcast, we are getting ready for season 2. I had guests lined up, and it was going to be awesome. In September of that year, I had a phone call with Powder to finalize the details that we had been talking about for months. It was time to sign the deal that was going to start in October. On the call, I was told that budgets had been cut and they were going to focus on print. I was pissed. They had strung me along and fucked me over, and now I was going to be out 50% of my salary. I told the guy on the call that he was making the wrong decision, that if they only focused on print, he would be looking for a new job soon. He let me know that I was on speakerphone and there were more Powder employees on the call and I should watch what I said. I mentioned to everyone on the call that they would all be looking for new jobs too. I was super pissed about this whole deal, and while I never said anything about this on my podcast, I did let friends know that I thought Powder would be out of business in the next 5 years. I said that a lot, and while I really did mean it, I didn't want it to happen. But it did. All of those people that were on that call, well, they were gone from Powder within 2 years, and 5 years later, almost to the month, Powder Magazine has folded. What really sucks about this is that Powder started to change for the better. Gone were the, I'm so much smarter than you folks, and back were the people who cared about making content that skiers wanted to read. Since I had made sure not to badmouth Powder on my podcast, I brought Sierra Schaefer, their new editor, on as a podcast guest and gave her praise for changing things up. The industry is way too small for hard feelings. And even though I predicted this to happen, it sucks so bad. But that's what happens when you're bought by the devil and don't show significant numbers or revenue increase. All skiers and snowboarders lost something today, and that's sad. The good thing is they only lost magazines, not the sports, and skiing and snowboarding are just as fun with or without a magazine. Now, a lot of the stuff I'm reading is saying that it's an indefinite furlough, which has people speculating that these titles could be back. My guess, and that's all that this is a guess, is that these magazines are done. Why would you piss so many people off just to bring this thing back in a year? The only hope is that they can sell the names of these important titles to someone who cares about making them great again. And while a lot of people say print is dead, it's not. There is still a market for good print, and I highly recommend that you subscribe to the Ski Journal, the Snowboarder's Journal, Free Skier, or the newly back from the dead Mountain Gazette. So for now, please pour out a little beer for our dead homies Powder, Snowboarder, Surfer, and Bike. Hopefully, they'll be brought back from the dead too. But let's stop talking about sad stuff. It's time to get into part 2 with Chris Davenport. And if you listened to part 1, you know what a rad dude Dav is. And while part 1 of his podcast was interesting, part 2 is even better. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it, follow me on Instagram @The Powell Movement, and support my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They're Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Cole Headwear, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Now it's time for part 2 with Chris Davenport.
I guided a client, hiked over to Crested Butte, and then met up with Wendy and hiked back. So yeah, that was cool.
Nice.
Always good to see some friends, and she's one of my oldest ski buddies. So it was fun to connect with her.
You've been skiing with her since what, the 90s?
Oh gosh, well no, we met in probably 86, 87.
Oh geez.
She was at Burke Mountain Academy with Shane and others. So that's when I met her, but we were just at ski races together because she was on the U.S. ski team after that, and then she moved to Crested Butte. But we kind of like reconnected as friends in 96 at the World Extreme Championships in Valdez, and then began filming with Matchstick and traveling together a ton.
Nice. When we talked last time, we were kind of almost at that point. We were getting towards South America. You had just competed in the 94 Extremes, and that summer you were heading to Las Leñas. And I can imagine when you go to Santiago for the first time, you land there, you get in a van, and they take you up into the mountains, and you go up into those switchbacks for the first time, and your mind is completely blown, like I'm going to die on the car ride.
Yeah, well, actually the first time I was down there was in Las Leñas, Argentina. So,
oh, my bad. Yeah, sorry.
It's all good. We flew to Buenos Aires. There was a group of Aspen skiers that I had hooked up with after I moved here. And these guys were sort of OGs. They'd been skiing in South America and they'd been ski racers and whatnot. And one of the guys, Scott, was good friends with Coombs. And they said, hey, we're going to Las Leñas. And I was like, game on. Awesome. I'll go too. So I went with them the first time. That was 94. And that was just a free ski trip. It was just for fun and went down there. Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, I was blown away. Culturally, we nailed the snow. I was able to ski around with some locals and kind of really learn the mountain of Las Leñas. And most importantly, I was able to meet Doug Coombs.
That guy's a legendary dude in the ski world. And you hear so much about what he did, but what kind of dude is Doug Coombs? Is he one of those dudes that you want to go sit at the bar and have a beer with and tell stories with? What kind of person is he?
Yeah, I would say for sure he's the kind of person you want to sit with and just absorb knowledge. I mean, I had seen him in some ski movies already, certainly knew his name, knew that he was interested in climbing and mountaineering and alpinism, which is what I was interested in. And he was sort of a revered figure in the early big mountain skiing world, at least as an American. So yeah, I was thrilled to meet him and we got to ski together. And I was young. Gosh, I was 23, I guess. And after skiing with him for a few days, he started calling me Chief Young Legs. It was pretty funny because I just was super fit and I was willing to put in the boot pack. So that's something that I look back on as just funny. And I don't know, it was cool. And afterwards, at the end of this particular week, we've been kind of climbing around and I didn't have any touring gear or anything like that. He gave me his set of Alpine Trekkers. Backcountry accesses, touring adapters that you would clip into your Alpine bindings. And they've been known as day wreckers over the years. But back then, for just cruising around the side country of ski resorts, they were pretty handy. And I still have that pair that he gave me. I'll never give them away. I don't know. It's kind of like an heirloom from Doug Coombs' legacy. And so, yeah, that was 94. And then I went back in the summer of 95, and the resort, I guess, had started the South American Extreme Skiing Championships. And so a bunch of the current North American and European and Kiwi, Australian free ski competitors that were the early folks on the circuit all rendezvoused down in Las Leñas. And you can only imagine the free-for-all that was down there with skiing and nightlife, and it was awesome. It was really great. And that particular competition was the one that sort of showed me that I could make something of it. I did fairly well the first 2 days. I don't remember exactly how I did, but I won the finals. So the final day, the final run, I had the highest score. And that left me sort of scratching my head like, okay, if I can beat all these top people, which included Shane and Kent Kryler. Those were my two roommates actually at this hotel in Las Leñas, which was hilarious. And Swanee was down there, and Dean Cummings, and Gordy Pfeiffer, Pete Bowers, also, the early guys. And so I thought to myself, okay, going into the following season, if I can win a run, I can win a whole event. And I just kind of had that mindset, which was pretty cool.
Does everybody kind of have that vision and belief at the same time that the sport is changing? While 95, it's starting to get cool. It hasn't really hit the masses yet, but you guys in the sport can feel it bubbling like, holy shit, we've got this new cool kind of aspect to the sport. And while snowboarding is huge right now because that was taking over, you guys are coming in with this new aspect, and it's going to help change things for skiing. Can you feel that internally? And then over the next 5 years, that builds?
Yeah, the energy is definitely already there. There's already discussions going on amongst the group organizing what would later become the International Free Skiers Association, or IFSA.
Yep.
So, yeah, there was already kind of discussion of like how we get a tour together, maybe how we bring together a point system between the events that existed at the time, which was the first two were the U.S. Extreme Skiing Championships in Crested Butte and the World Extreme Skiing Championships, or WESC, in Valdez. And then you had this event in Argentina, and the Red Bull Snow Thrill of Chamonix had started. That was also in 95. So I competed there in 95 as well. That was myself and Shane's first introduction to Red Bull. The idea was like, how do we bring together all of these events and create a tour, with a point system and whatnot? And the manufacturers, I would say, hadn't really taken notice of the needs of the competitors or the needs of this new style of skiing. So we were all basically still skiing on like whatever we could get.
Toothpicks?
Yeah. I mean, the performance skis at the time were like giant slalom skis or slalom skis. And that would be the case through basically 96. I think it was either the spring of 96 or into the fall of 97 when we first saw the Dynastar Big that Jeremy Nobis busted out. Brant Moles was on that Rossignol Cut 11.5.
Yep.
And, shaped skis, or God, I absolutely hate the word parabolic skis, but that was a word at that time. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, this is interesting. Maybe I should try out this, radical shape ski. And I got a pair of Dynastars, took them to New Zealand, and like immediately like did a hard turn and like spun around backwards and flipped over. And I was like, oh, these things are awful. It was terrible. So in 96 and 7, the manufacturers are starting to take notice a little bit after the World Extreme Skiing Championships in 96, which I won for the men and Wendy Fisher won for the women. Both she and I left Dynastar and went to Salomon, and they were very open to listening to product design and development ideas. And so I wrote the first design brief for the AK Rocket, which was our first fat ski.
Yep.
That was followed a year later by a project that Mike Douglas and I worked on, which was the Pocket Rocket.
You made Salomon a shit ton of money.
I'd like to think so, but they also paid us a lot of money too. So it was a good trade-off. That was my first sort of big ski industry sponsorship deal after I won the Worlds in 96. That spring, Salomon called, or maybe I called them. I think I might have called them. And that was my first 5-figure deal. So that was pretty good.
Yeah, because that's when things really happen for you. 96 is the big breakout year. You win the Worlds, like you say. And then you go to the World Heli Championships in New Zealand. Do you have to pay your way there? Is that like your last trip paying your own way, or do you have a sponsor at that point?
Yeah, that's right. In New Zealand that summer, I forgot about that. No, I definitely paid my own way. That year, 96, coming out off of the Las Leñas finals win, I was pretty motivated. And I had a old Ford F-250 pickup truck, which I sold that winter. I don't remember for how much, but I want to say it was $8,000 or $9,000. And I used that money to travel, to go to Chamonix again, to the Red Bull Snow Thrill, to go to Valdez. And then after I won in Valdez, of course, was invited to come down to New Zealand. I did buy my plane ticket, but once I was in New Zealand, the organizer of that event, who's been a friend ever since that day, Tony Harrington, or Harrow.
He just opened a gallery.
Totally, yeah, Harrow's gallery. He's just awesome. I was with him 2 winters ago down in Mount Buller in Australia, and he's just the man. So I slept, a bunch of us competitors slept at his house in Wanaka, and I was literally sleeping in an empty hot tub in this room. And he actually has pictures of it, which he sent me some years ago. It was hilarious. And I think a bunch of people were staying there. And then, yeah, we would get up and go out in the helicopter. And I won that. Yeah, I won the heli challenge. I think I won that a couple of years in a row. And those were fun years down there because, New Zealand is just awesome. We bought a car for $250 and just rallied it around Wanaka. And just, I think the wheels fell off or something, but it was amazing. And after Valdez that spring in, I guess it was April, that was my first ever heli skiing experience. And then in July, I'm in New Zealand heli skiing, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, it's all happening so fast, and it's all so awesome. And we're meeting so many people and seeing so many places. And actually that same trip to New Zealand for the heli challenge, I stayed a week after and filmed with Warren Miller, which was my first Warren Miller shoot. So that was pretty cool because Chris Patterson and Tom Day and the Warren Miller crew, Max Burvey, they had seen that I had won the World Extreme Skiing Championships, and, they're always looking for new talent, and boom, that happened. So things are like really happening, falling into place.
Yeah. And at this point, it's like you've been dirtbagging it for long enough. And this is when Salomon comes on as a sponsor. I mean, you've been with Dynastar, but this is when you get on Salomon and get a real deal. You're on before Mike Douglas was on, which is amazing because I think you're on a year before he was. He's been on for over 20 years. How does Salomon start for you?
So one of the guys who I had worked with at Dynastar, his name was Mike DeCesaro. He had been a Dynastar race guy for years. He'd actually worked with my sisters on, World Cup ski racing and had been giving me some skis. I didn't have a contract or anything, but once I won Valdez, he had left Dynastar that year and gone to Salomon. So we had this great connection. And so I called up and, said, hey, here's the deal, world champion. This is what I want to do with it. Here's my business plan. Let's grow each other's brand and business together. And yes, he presented that to the powers that be at Salomon, and we were able to ink a deal. And at the time, they didn't have apparel, but a year later, they opened the Salomon Design Center in Boulder, and I signed on with them for apparel. We began building apparel, and that was a really interesting project because it was my first time that I actually was able to sit with product designers and literally sketch out and develop the details of what would be Salomon's ski apparel. So yeah, I went full on Salomon from 96 through 2007. Yep. Almost 11 years or something like that. And it was fantastic. We had an amazing team. We would go to all the Salomon sales meetings in various parts of the country. They supported the films, of course. There was always budget to do projects or to travel. And the equipment was awesome. The skis, boots, bindings, and apparel was fantastic. So those were great years. And I definitely attribute a lot of my early success as a professional to the support of brands like Salomon.
Well, in the ski industry, Salomon was your undergrad. I mean, based on everything that you've done in your career, you've done product development. It looks like clothing. You've done skis. You've done boots. You've done just about everything you can possibly do. But in the beginning, you're learning that on Salomon's dime, where you're sitting with designers and you're going into their factory. So you're able to learn so much through those guys. And it seems like you were with Red Bull really early. I didn't realize that Red Bull was creating events in 95. Like you said, you and Shane went to a Red Bull event in Chamonix in 95, which is crazy to me. But how does your relationship with them start? Because I feel like you might have been their first athlete ever, you or Shane.
Yeah, we basically signed around the same time. I'm the OG. I'm the oldest, that's the wrong word, the longest running athlete in North America for Red Bull. But My first contact with Red Bull was actually in 95 at that event in Chamonix. We met the marketing manager. Her name was Karen Lechner, wonderful gal, still friends with her. And she told Shane and I that Red Bull was thinking or planning on coming to the United States or coming to North America sometime in the coming years. And we're like, okay, that's pretty cool. We didn't know much about the brand at that time.
Right.
But started learning more about it, thought it was really cool, enjoyed the product itself, and went back in 96. And it was kind of the same conversation with Red Bull, with Karen, like, hey, I think we're coming to the US this year. You guys definitely stay in touch. And that fall of 96, I had signed up for what was the 24 Hours of Aspen. And I don't know if you remember that event, but it was the World Championships of Endurance Skiing.
You set a record there, right?
I got close.
Okay.
But anyway, it was an incredible event. Doesn't happen anymore because once we got the X Games in Aspen and we had the World Cup ski racing, it was like too many big events. So the 24 hours went away. But in 96, I think we started it in 93 or 94 in Aspen. In 96, I was competing at the 24 hours. And on Aspen Mountain, for those of you that haven't been to Aspen or skied Aspen Mountain, we have a gondola that runs from town to the top, and it's like 3,100 vertical feet and 2.2 miles, basically straight down the gut of the mountain. So it makes for a great opportunity to see how many laps you can ski and how much vertical you can ski in 24 hours. So basically you get off the gondola or you start at the top, you and your partner. So it's a team race and you race together the whole time. It's not like a relay. So my partner was Tyler Williams, who would also go on to become a Red Bull athlete. And you go out of the start at noon and you basically tuck down the mountain up to, I think we went 96, 97 miles an hour, pretty much every run. Yeah, it's fast, on 222 downhill skis. I think I've had 8 or 10 pairs of Salomon downhill skis, all prepped. And, every run we would switch them out and we had technicians tuning them.
So this is an insane event.
It's an insane event. It's absolutely the most physically demanding thing that I've ever done by like miles. We trained for 6 months, 5 days a week. I've never been so fit and so big and strong because it's very different than kind of free skiing power and endurance.
Yeah.
But that year, and actually the year before, 95 and 96, a team from Austria, because it's an international event, there'd be like, Team France, Team Germany, Team Austria, Team Switzerland, Team USA, Team Chile. All these countries would send a team of 2 people. And the Austrian team was the Red Bull team. It was Axel Naglik and Christopher Reindl. And they had these white, like Red Bull speed suits and Red Bull helmets. And they actually shipped a pallet of Red Bull to Aspen from Austria and were distributing it around town. So this stuff was like contraband. It was awesome. Everybody was like, oh, you get your hands on some of that Red Bull that's kicking around, It's hilarious, like this illegal thing or something. And we went to a party at their condo one evening. I think it was maybe a day or two after the race, and had Red Bull vodkas. And the whole thing was like, this is so awesome. And so getting to meet Christopher and Axel was big because Christopher went on to be like the senior vice president of marketing at Red Bull and started Red Bull Media House.
Okay.
And was the big boss at Red Bull Media House for a long time, up until just a few years ago. He was running all of their media side. And so being connected with Axel and Christopher, having the connection from the Red Bull Snow Thrill Chamonix, it made myself and then Shane, natural selections for the first Red Bull athletes in the United States. Anyway, that year in 96 at the 24 Hours of Aspen, those guys won. Axel and Christopher, the Red Bull team, they won the race. Myself and Tyler were second. We were right in there and there was respect. And the following year, 97, just to kind of finish off the 24 Hours of Aspen story, because it is one of my favorite or most proud events I've ever done. 97, I was ready to go and win it that year. And in New Zealand at the World Heli Challenge that we talked about earlier, in the Big Mountain Day, because the World Heli Challenge had a Chinese downhill, a freestyle day, and a Big Mountain competition day. Mm-hmm. And in the Big Mountain Day, I made a mistake on my run and kind of screwed up a turn and fell. And when I landed, I just landed weird and tore my knee, tore my ACL.
Okay.
My first ski injury, I knew it right away. I felt the pop, the thing that I had heard about. And I was like, and shit. And I had like tears in my eyes. I was so bummed because everything was going so well. And here I am, like newly crowned world champion and everything's just awesome. And then I've got a torn knee and I'm like, oh no. And this was in July. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I can come back for the 24 hours in December. So I went home, I had surgery, worked my ass off and got really strong. But it was, I'm like 6 months out post-op, and it just doesn't make sense to put myself through 24 hours of potential re-injury.
Sure.
So I bowed out that year. I foreran the race. I did TV stuff for the race. I helped out, but I just didn't race. And then we came back the following year in 98, my partner Tyler and I, and ended up winning the race. And I think we skied 81 laps and 265,000 vertical in 24 hours. And we only won by like 14 seconds. Like, it was really close. And in fact, we were like not in the lead until 3, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. We took the lead and then held it. And oh my God, once I did that, I was like, okay, I'm never doing that again.
Right.
It was so demanding on the body. And that was December 98. My wife, Jessie, or she was going to be my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time, was ski patrolling in Chamonix that 98, 99 winter. And in December, when the 24 hours was going on, she was already in Chamonix. So after the race, a day or two later, I got on a plane and flew there, and we spent the whole winter. We moved to Chamonix, but I remember landing in Geneva and like almost needing a wheelchair to get off the plane. My legs were so sore from sitting there after that 24 hours race.
Huh.
Oh man, those were good years.
And thinking of that year where you win that 24-hour race, I think that might have been the same year where you got a bronze at the X Games in skier cross as well.
Yeah. No, I think that was the same year. Yeah, that was the 3rd or 4th year of Winter X, and it had moved to Crested Butte, and skier cross was a new event. And actually, there was quite a connection with Salomon. We were talking about Salomon earlier. The founder of the X Games from ESPN was a guy named Ron Semio.
Yeah.
And Ron actually came to our Salomon sales meeting at Crested Butte the winter before. I think it was 97.
Just smoking cigarettes and talking like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you remember Ron. Great guy. And I'll never forget riding the lift with him and talking about this concept for a motocross race on skis. It had been done before. There'd been these things called like the Wild Dash for Cash, or the Matchstick Productions had done a thing called the Psycho Cross. And it was basically just like a Chinese downhill. But ESPN, with their X Games property, wanted to sort of formalize it into a more organized race. So yeah, that first year of the skier cross at the X Games, I won a bronze behind the French guy, Denny Ray, and then Kent Kreitler was second. And oh man, it was loose. I felt fortunate. A couple people crashed in front of me, and I like literally just skied into 3rd place into the bronze medal. But you know what? Medal at the X Games is a medal at the X Games. It carries a lot of weight. Pretty proud of that one. It's hanging in my garage. I got rid of most of my trophies, and I've kept a few of them. That X Games medal is definitely one of them.
Yeah, I talked to Ralphs about it, and I keep bringing up Ralphs and you. I don't know why, because you're from the same kind of generation, but different sides of the sport too. So I don't know why I keep bringing parallels between you and
Well,
Darren.
we're good friends.
Yeah, but he was saying that no one cared that he did anything at Hahnenkamm or anything like that in the States. All they cared about was him and his X Games gold medal, which he kind of laughed at. He's like, "Whoa, do you know that like I've won a race that's so much bigger than this?" But with you, when you look at that year, and that year's a big one for you because the 24 hours of Aspen is something that's been on your list that you wanted to check off. X Games is not on your list at all, but you happen to get into it and get a medal. What's more important for you at that point?
At that point, the 24 hours was more important to me because it was so much more demanding and so much more competitive. I mean, there was top racers from around the world, people that had come off the World Cup. So to win against that kind of field with my partner Tyler and I mean, it was, to this day, I can look back and point to that as like, again, the most demanding event that I've ever done, and one of my proudest victories because it just took so much effort. The X Games one, while it's widely regarded in America, everybody knows the X Games franchise in that property. Like I said, I sort of skied into that bronze medal without, I was a bit lucky, put it that way. At the Hahnenkamm for Rolfs, you don't get lucky and ski into 3rd or 2nd or 1st. You got to nail it. And I guess I skied well, but it was also like kind of a fluke. And just on the X Games topic, the couple of years later at Mount Snow, Vermont, I was still competing in the X Games, and they had a really cool event that was a combination ski and snowboard event where it was a relay. So like the skier would go out first, go down the course, and you had like a transponder electronic device on your ankle. And when you cross the finish line, the gate for your partner would open. So I had this awesome snowboard partner, Jason Evans, and we literally were winning. I was going to get a gold medal at the X Games at Mount Snow. We made it into the finals. The snowboarders had gone out first. So I think it was 4 snowboarders. He crossed the finish line first. My gate opened first. I'm out on the course first. I'm having a clean run, and I'm like 5-10 seconds from the finish line, and I blow a turn and go into the net. And I'm done. I DNF'd. I left an X Games gold medal on the net. And I think back on my career, and that's one of the times where I blew it the worst. I mean, I had mostly success, but that time I was just like, I felt so bad. I mean, it was like we both would have won like 15 grand or something. I don't remember what it was, 12 grand. So that was a bummer. It would have been nice to have a gold medal too.
Now it's time for me to take a sponsor break, and my first sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They have been brewing the Northwest's best beer and supporting all things ski, snowboard, and bike since 2006. When I say their beer is the best, I really mean that. Recently, I've been drinking Nature Calls Mountain IPA, and not only does it have the best name in beer, a portion of the proceeds benefits the Conservation Alliance, so it does make a difference. And as far as supporting action sports, no other beer comes close to what 10 Barrel does for ski, snowboard, and bike. Next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel and support the beer that supports the sports we love, the 10 Barrel Brewery. My next sponsor is Stanley. You know, the brand that has been around for over 100 years, the ones that invented that keep things hot and keep things cold category. Back in the day, you could count on your grandpa's green Stanley to keep the hot chocolate, soups, and so much more hot. Well, these days, Stanley still makes that same green bottle, and they also make so many more products that will keep your liquids hotter and colder for a couple hours longer than any other product on the market. You know I think you deserve the best for less, and I'm going to make that happen again at Stanley. To save 30% on all Stanley products, head on over to stanley-pmi.com, go shopping, head to checkout, enter the code drinkfast, that's all one word, all lowercase, and you're good to go. You'll save 30%. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. You can look at your career as been so lucky at so many different things. I mean, so many things have lined up. I mean, given you had the knee injury, but this X Games thing where you should have been able to just ski through and win a gold medal, that was one area you weren't lucky in your career.
Yeah, and you know who beat me, which even stung worse, was Sean Palmer.
Oh, man.
So I was like, Sean won the gold. My gosh, you got to be kidding me. But you know what? All props to Sean. He's an insane athlete, and it was kind of cool to see him come in and get on skis and actually beat some like World Cup skiers.
And then tell people too, like, I'm a better skier than Chris Davenport and Darren Rouse.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was hilarious. It was hilarious.
You know, going back to Red Bull, because we talked about them for a little bit, and being that you're super into fitness, or you're a pretty fit dude, do you take advantage of all the opportunities in terms of personal health that Red Bull brings to the table? Like going to California and their training areas and everything they have?
Yes, I try to. I definitely have been to the Red Bull High Performance Center in Santa Monica and taken advantage of other training opportunities with Red Bull. I mean, when they provide a resource like that, you'd be crazy not to take advantage of it. And as a professional athlete, it is literally my job to maintain a high level of fitness, not only for myself personally, but also as an example for our industry and our followers and the consumers of like, these are professional athletes. This is what they do. We take it seriously. So yeah, Red Bull and the resources they provide, it's incredible. The facility in Santa Monica is literally world class. I don't know if there's a better training facility in the country, at least maybe not as high tech. There's so much technology there. There's a lot of things that I haven't taken advantage of there, like the sensory deprivation tanks, and they do all this like mind training that I think race car drivers really take advantage of and gamers take advantage of. But yeah, there's just incredible stuff there, and the staff is amazing. Actually, I was hoping to be able to go there and spend a week this fall, like in October, pre-season, but I don't think they're sort of open for people at the moment, but we'll have to find out about that.
Man, it's Red Bull. I'm sure they could have a test door to get all their athletes in.
I mean, another thing with that is that, you know, if you can't go, we all have a training budget too. So not only do I have my retainer as an athlete, but I have money that I can use for physical therapy or a personal trainer here at home in Aspen, or fitness equipment that I might need. All of those things are provided. they want us to be the best that we can be, and it's worth investing. So when they look at investing in an athlete, say they're going to hire a new skateboarder, for instance, or skier or whatever, and they're going to pay them, 50 grand, and that's the retainer. There's going to be at least another 50 that's going to go towards training budget, travel budget, performance, help, marketing, other things out there. It's a big investment with all these athletes.
It's funny. You learn in marketing that for every dollar you spend on an athlete, you should spend about $3 in telling people about it and supporting that athlete. But in all the marketing that I've done in my career, it's like all the money goes to the athlete, and then you're scrambling to figure out how to support the athlete because there's just no money there. But with Red Bull, money's not an issue, and they're the ones who are doing it textbook and doing it right, which is pretty amazing. Another thing with them is you're an athlete with McConkey on Red Bull. And with him, part of what he brought to the table was base jumping and eventually wingsuiting. And you're super tight with that dude. Do you ever get involved with any of that shit with him?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was a participant in the first ever plunge to your death camp. McConkey's fun way of hucking his friends off the Perrin Bridge in Idaho.
Did he make you write a letter to your family about why you were going to die first?
Well, my wife was actually with me, and he was grabbing her, trying to strap a base rig on her and throw her off the bridge too. And she resisted, but we were up in Idaho for our good friend Tag Kleiner's wedding in Sun Valley. Tag had worked at Smith forever, and Smith was actually my first sponsor. And Shane was up there. And so after the wedding, we all went down. It was me, JT Holmes, and Othar Lawrence, who's a Red Bull paraglider and Red Bull Air Force guy.
Yep.
And I think I had been paragliding a bunch up to that point. And Othar was also a paraglider. JT, I don't think had ever been under a canopy. So the three of us were total rookies, and Shane threw all three of us off the bridge. I think I did 3 base jumps off that bridge that day. Of course, Othar and JT would go on to be professional base jumpers and, air sports pioneers along with Shane. But I just felt like I had enough risk in my life with big mountain skiing and alpinism and all that I just didn't need to pursue base jumping. So I never did any more base jumps, but I'm glad that I did those ones. They were super thrilling. And then, of course, with Shane over the years, I participated in many of his stunts, including sneaking into skyscrapers in downtown Vancouver and breaking into the rooftop and jumping off the roof where I was holding his parachute as he jumped off. I did the same thing with him in massive cliffs in Chamonix and in maybe Yosemite, other places. I helped him achieve his goals, and it was really fun for me to participate and kind of feel like we were doing something illegal, but it was really exciting.
Yep.
And in fact, one of those jumps that we did in Vancouver was in a Matchstick movie. You see him land in the dark and jump in the car with Gaffney and I think Johnny Mosley.
Yep.
And they speed off. And I had to escape from the roof of the building and take the elevator down to floor 2 and then take the stairs down to the parking garage and then run outside. And then they picked me up and we all took off. And this was after we had this amazing crew up in Bella Coola. It was Seth and Shane and myself and Mosley and McGovern and Pondella and Murray and Steve and just a great crew. Super fun shoot.
Amazing. At this point in your career, you've got Salomon and Red Bull. Who else is paying the bills back in those early days?
Smith, for sure, was there. And I was wearing a Giro helmet at the time because Smith didn't have helmets yet. Backcountry Access was my sort of backcountry gear provider. It was just before I switched over to Black Diamond. Power Bar was a sponsor in the early years before they became sort of corporate and were bought by Nestle. I can't remember what year that happened, but early 2000s, I switched to Cliff Bar, and I've been with Cliff ever since, and that was a fantastic move. Aspen Snowmass, of course, been contract athlete with them since 96, and I was, of course, an employee with them before that, if you'd listened to the first segment of this podcast.
Saying that, what point in your career, we're talking about getting paid and everything, but what point in your career do you realize that you don't have to sit at a desk and set gates anymore at Aspen and you are going to be a pro skier? Is there a day where that all happens where you're like, holy shit, I've got all this coming in, I'm going to quit?
Yes, there was. I don't remember if there was a day, but after I won the World Championships in 96, I did work that summer up at Snowmass Ski Area on the summer trail crew. We were doing a ski area expansion project, so I was cutting trails and helping install a new high-speed quad lift. And it was a fantastic job with some great people that I'm still really friendly with here. And then that fall 96 going into the winter 97, I had written new contracts, I guess, with more money. And so that next winter 97, I did not work for the Aspen Skiing Company. I only focused on being an athlete and competing and setting up film shoots and getting out with photographers and, working on product stuff. And literally that was my first full-time winter as a professional skier. And I think we throw the word professional skier or professional athlete around loosely because I personally don't believe if you're just getting a bunch of free product, you should call yourself a pro skier. A pro skier is somebody who's making a real living and supporting themselves.
You don't have another job. You ski.
Yeah, you don't have another job and you're not making 10 grand a year either. You can't be just dirtbagging it. So no, at that point I was making if not six figures, pretty darn close to it. And all of a sudden things were really good.
That's amazing. And you mentioned all the different things you have to do to make the Davenport brand kind of go in terms of planning shoots, working with photographers, movie companies. But there's also the contract part too. Who's running the Davenport empire? Do you have an agent or you do all things in-house?
Yeah, I'm doing all things in-house. I mean, I got a great education. I mean, I'd like to think that the money my family spent to send me to good schools and college was worth it because I took that education. And I mean, working within the industry with somebody like you at K2 or the guys at Salomon or Red Bull, it's not that hard. These are personal relationships that you really want to cultivate. And I just didn't feel like I needed an agent to do this type of business. I enjoyed that aspect of it. And I always felt like, maybe still feel like it to this day, that I probably was never the best skier out there. I was a good one, but maybe not the best. But I was really good at the business side of it. I was really good at the marketing of my own brand, the communications and storytelling of what Chris Davenport does. I was good at communicating with my product sponsors and partners. And that, I think, is the thing that perhaps set me apart from some other athletes that were as good, if not better, than me at the actual skiing part, but just never could put it together as a professional.
Yeah, I mean, you had the education first and then the professional part came. A lot of those other guys, they start at 15 being told how great they are. And at 15, you weren't great. You were a racer who wasn't great.
I was definitely not great, but I'm really glad that I was at the right place at the right time in terms of the early days of free skiing. And I had gone to college and gotten a great education and sort of had that in my toolkit to take with me as a pro skier. Because like you said, nowadays, or, even 10, 15 or 20 years ago, if you were 16 or 18 years old, young X Games athlete, and you're barely finishing high school and then never going to college, especially if you're a freestyle skier, a park and pipe skier, your career is short. And then, okay, maybe you take it to the backcountry and you're doing stuff there, but still, are you doing that in your 30s, late 30s, 40s, late 40s? I mean, at some point you realize that that education that you either missed or had is important.
Yeah. And I mean, not a lot of people can do it like you're doing it. I mean, the shelf life of a pro skier, you've kind of broken those barriers, but it used to be 35 years old, man. If you got to 35, it was an amazing career. And you and Douglas and a lot of other people are changing that vision, but you guys are the ones who started this new kind of style of skiing, it seems like. But I like to talk about money in these podcasts. It's always uncomfortable, and I try to change the way I do it from time to time. And I guess with you, I'll ask, do you live in Aspen proper?
I do not live in Aspen proper. And the reason being I cannot afford to live in Aspen proper. We live in a valley called Old Snowmass, which is sort of between Snowmass Ski Resort and Basalt, the town of Basalt. So we're 12 miles from Aspen, and it's beautiful. I've got a couple acres and a great house that I've owned for over 20 years, which has grown in value, and it's been a great investment. I would love to be able to live in Aspen. I don't know what the average home price is there right now.
1.9 million.
No, it's like 5.
The median home price in Aspen I Googled was 1.9.
Yeah, you can't buy a house in Aspen for 1.9. That's a weird statistic.
Okay.
We can debate that.
No, the internet's not always true. So I believe you. You live there.
Even if it was 1.9, I'm still not living in Aspen.
Right.
So we have a great place down here. It's awesome. It's been a great place to raise kids. And, the one downside is I don't really like getting in the car every day. I mean, my lifelong dream was to live in a ski in, ski out kind of setup, but I don't know if that'll ever happen, especially living here. But yeah, it's all good. It's fine. I love the space and being able to have a big garage and enough outdoor space that I wouldn't be able to have in Aspen because it just doesn't exist.
Well, the Lindsey Vonns of the world can live in Aspen. The Chris Davenports can live 10 minutes outside of Aspen. It's okay.
It is totally okay. And mad respect to Lindsey Vonn. She's done a great job with her brand and her business. But she did just sell her place in Vail.
Like you said, skiing powder days and shit like that isn't on her bucket list of things to do. There are other things. Ski racing was just what she was good at.
Yeah.
So that's really all we need to talk about money. And I know you do well and you've amassed tons of sponsors. We should shout out whoever pays you these days just to be nice.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I've been so fortunate to have been with, I guess my longest running partners now are Red Bull and Aspen Snowmass. After Salomon, I left Salomon to start up Kastle skis. Mm-hmm. Kastle was, of course, an old Austrian ski brand that had been around for 70 years. And in the late 90s, they went out of business. Their parent company shut them down. And in 2007, 3 guys that used to work at Fisher Skis got together over beers. They were buddies and they were like, let's look into bringing Kastle back. I was the first person in North America that they called. So I started the business over here with Kastle. They eventually became one of the owners. And we sold the company a year and a half ago, or maybe almost 2 years ago, to a Czech investor. So Kastle Skis, even though the office is still in Austria, is owned by a Czech guy. And now a lot of the skis are being made in the Czech Republic instead of being made in Austria. So anyway, yeah, Kastle, that was great. I'm still with them as an athlete and an ambassador, but yeah, did sell the company. That was a cool process to go through. I still sit on the board of Kastle North America, and we're cranking. And Spider Apparel. When I left Salomon to sign with Kastle, I also left Salomon Apparel for a few years, was with Helly Hansen. And then the marketing director at Helly left to go to Spider, and he brought me along to Spider in 2010. And that ended up being the most lucrative deal I ever had because I was allowed to design and develop my own collection of technical apparel, which I had a global royalty deal on. I mean, that's what's been sending my kids away to school. That deal right there, that's been a good one. And so, yeah, props to Spider. Of course, Cliff Bar I've been with forever as my energy food supplier. Love those guys. Cliff and I align really closely on values around sustainability and climate and, environmentalism and public lands and all of those things.
Yep.
And then Black Diamond Equipment. It's been since mid 2000s. That's my backcountry and avalanche and mountaineering and accessories provider. Gloves, poles, backpacks, avalanche gear, all that stuff. And then Sweet Protection is a more recent one. Sweet is a Norwegian helmet goggle company. So I'm using their eyewear and their helmets, and they're just the coolest people ever. The Scandinavian design, I just love. So the relationship with Sweet has been really fantastic. Oh, of course, Scarpa boots. My gosh, I've been with Scarpa since I left. Well, actually, no. After Salomon, I had a couple years with Garmont. I was really doing a lot more backcountry skiing, of course, and ski mountaineering and the Colorado 14ers project and on and on and on. So I was with Garmont, but then it's been now 10 or 12 years with Scarpa. And I've been involved in a number of boot design projects with them, which has just been super interesting. I love going to Italy and sitting down with the designers there and drinking espresso in the factory. So yeah, Scarpa guys, and they're based in Boulder here in North America. So it's really easy for me to go down and visit Scarpa down there. Gosh, I'm probably missing somebody. I hope I'm not.
Now it's time for my final sponsor break, and Cole Headwear is new to the show, but not new to my life. Cole is a Seattle company that is made up of some of the raddest people I know. And on top of being rad, they make the best fitting beanies and hats out there, period. Nothing else comes close. Saying that may offend some other friends I have in the hat business, but honestly, when I make Powell Movement hats and beanies, I always go with the best, and the best is Cole. You know who else deserves the best? You do. And you shouldn't have to pay full price for it. So I'm going to save you 15% on everything Cole, and all you need to do is head on over to coleheadwear.com, go shopping, buy some stuff, and at checkout, enter the code POWEL15, that's all one word, all lowercase, and you'll save some money and help support the show. Last but not least is Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. And this year, Peter Glenn has something new for us out here on the interwebs. Starting Friday, October 16th and running through Monday, October 19th is Peter Glenn's Snowtober virtual ski and snowboard event. During this celebration of snow, Peter Glenn will have discussions hosted by Johnny Mosley with pros, Olympians, industry icons, and ski resort representatives. And I'll even get in on the action by interviewing Johnny Mosley and snowboard legend Dave Downing. There's going to be brands, resorts, and you guessed it, deals, deals, deals. To find out more about Peter Glenn's Snowtober event, head on over to snowtober.com. That's SNOWTOBER.com. And you will find out all about what's going on. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. You've had so many sponsors, and we know that you've made a lot of money through skiing, which is great over the days. We don't have to talk about money anymore because, it's just kind of beating a dead horse with me and how I do this podcast.
Yeah, what's up with your fixation on money anyway?
I grew up with a shit ton of it, and then we lost it all in my junior year of high school. So I went from having everything to having nothing, and it was really sad. I couldn't do a lot of things that I like to do, and we turned everything around, and everything's fine now. But I think that's why I have a fixation on it. So, I like to joke that I'm Jewish, and that's why, but I think it's just having a ton of money and then losing it is why I like to talk about it.
I'm really fascinated by the business of sports, not just skiing, but action sports in general, cycling or climbing or running, athletes that are independent athletes like myself, and how they figure it out and make money and what those contracts look like. And so that business side of it is really interesting. And I mentor a lot of younger athletes that will either call to ask about a certain deal that they're doing, or, hey, how did you go about doing this or that? And I don't have all the answers, but I do have a lot of experience, and it's fun to be able to share that with, younger athletes and see them succeed.
People are, I won't say dumb, but without the experience and getting into this world and trying to do stuff on their own, they don't know much, and it comes off as like, hey, that was a dumb decision, unless you talk to someone like yourself or someone else that can guide you. So if you're going to get that first contract, talk to somebody before you're blinded by it and sign.
That's absolutely true. But you are also right. Some people are dumb. And in fact, there's a good percentage of people in this country right now that I think are not that smart.
No, I agree with you there. But what we need to talk about, and not about dumb people, is we need to talk about just the sport and how the sport is changing, because back then you're on Salomon, Mike Douglas is on Salomon. He's going to develop the 1080. There's going to be two factions within the sport. He's kind of on both sides, but you're really not in the twin tip game that much. Whatever, you're more big mountain ski stuff, Chris Davenport. But as things are evolving, media is being created around the sport. First, I'm going to talk about Freeze, even though MSP is before them. But were you involved with the starting of Freeze magazine?
I mean, I wasn't involved in the starting. Of course, it was Mike Jakowitz's baby, I guess, and some other folks. But I mean, those were my friends. Those were the people that I was hanging out with at industry events, competitions, film premieres. That was our crew. So I definitely considered, I had a Freeze sticker on my skis. I definitely considered myself part of that gang. And the energy around Freeze magazine was awesome. It was this confluence of big mountain and freestyle and culture. So it was cool to be a part of that while it was going on.
I think it comes out of Boulder, at least Jake goes there too. So are you hanging out at the Freeze offices all the time and being a contributor, or at least being part of their stories?
Yep, I was a contributor. I think I wrote some stuff for them and hung out at the office. And most of the time we would see each other at movie tours or events or industry events and things, parties or whatnot. But that was my crew. That was my tribe. They were definitely tied in closely with the Matchstick Productions crew, TGR crew, and then, of course, hosting all the events that they did, US Open and whatnot. Those were amazing days. It seems like it went by so quickly, and then Freeze was gone.
I know. It seemed like a really quick burst, but even before Freeze, and someone who lasted a lot longer is MSP. They've been around since like 93. And when do you become aware of everything they are doing? Because you weren't with them in the beginning, but you eventually became known for being part of MSP.
No, I got a trivia question for you. Do you remember or know the name of Stephen Murray's first movie?
No.
I think it was called Nachos and Fear.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because I mean, I couldn't pull it off the top of my head, but I've looked at it.
93 or it is 93 or 94. I became aware of them probably around 94, 95 when I saw their first movie, Soul Sessions, or the first movie I saw was, I think, Soul Sessions and Epic Impressions, and then followed the next year by The Hedonist.
Okay.
And those were awesome. Those were, local CB skiers. And then Seth was, of course, in there as a youngster. And then the first movie that I filmed with them, I think, was Pura Vida, which probably was 96, going into 97, I'm guessing. Does that sound right?
Yeah, those are the 97 filming, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, that was just awesome. I loved working with that crew. We always had incredible photographers with us as well. You'd end up getting a magazine story from the trip. You'd get a film segment from the trip. Photos would be going out to sponsors. It was just like incredible content creation in these new locations that ski consumers had never seen before, like Bella Coola, where's that?
Right.
Or Tulsaquah, BC, or Cordova, or Haines, or, we were going to these places that really we were some of the first people to go to. Obviously, in the late 90s, new cat and heli operations were opening up like a dime a dozen, like every year as the industry was growing. And so they wanted the exposure and they wanted those film crews to come. And we got to go to so many new places and wild places. I mean, we went to like gold mining camps and set up shop and just like hunkered down and heli skied out of these places. And in Europe, I'll never forget, probably my favorite film shoot and one of my favorite movies was, and I think it was 99 that we filmed it. It would have come out in the fall of 99, was Global Storming.
Yep.
And that was a real wake up call for the whole crew that was there, which was Wendy Fisher, Dean Cummings, and myself. And gosh, I can't remember if I think Seth might have been there with us as well, or Kreitler. I have to go back and look. Anyway, and Murray and Pondella. And we, after it was the biggest winter in like 100 years in Chamonix, or in the Alps. There was massive avalanches across the range that were causing total destruction, hitting villages, killing people. It was gnarly. And we were filming that spring on the Brevant in Chamonix after a pretty big storm, like a couple feet of snow. The next day it dawned bluebird, and we were up on the tram on the Brevant first thing in the morning, tons of new snow, just gorgeous. And we go out into the backcountry, into the Brevant Couloir area, and it's cold in the morning, and we're working shots, and it's just awesome. But by like 11, I guess, you could feel the sun heating up. Things just started changing, right? Like anytime you feel a change in the temperature, like a spike, it's a red flag. And even though none of us were avalanche professionals at the time, we were pretty green. We definitely sensed things were changing. We had gotten some great stuff, and it was time to regroup and think about what we were doing. So we regrouped on this ridge in a safe zone, and no sooner than we had all gathered on this ridge, another crew had come in above us, like thousands of feet, a couple thousand feet above us. And we looked up, and it was a snowboard crew out of Whistler, and they began shooting, and two snowboarders hit this cliff near where all of our tracks were. And they hit this cliff, landed, and the entire slope, including our tracks, released and came smoking down the mountain towards us. We were standing out on this ridge. So we're like, there's nowhere we could go. We were like, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. And somebody, I think like Dean was like, I think I saw people in there. And this avalanche, this massive freight train of an avalanche came smoking past us. I mean, I'm talking like 20, 30, 40 feet from us, making a noise unlike anything I'd ever heard. None of us had ever been this close to an avalanche of this magnitude before. And the avalanche went roaring past and then dropped, a few more thousand feet down into the valley. And then a snowboarder came down behind it on the bed surface. Like, did you see him? Did you see him? We're like, oh my God, we didn't see anybody. And he like kept going. And I was like, holy shit, there was one of these guys was caught. So we traversed around. I was hauling ass like out of the avalanche path, kind of around back towards the ski area, and then raced down the mountain. And I was the first person on scene at the toe of the avalanche at the bottom. And I found this kid's body. He was very, very dead on the surface. And then a few minutes later, the rest of our team started arriving, and we had already immediately got a call in to the rescue service on our radio. And so the helicopter was like right on it. And the helicopter as soon as the helicopter landed, I mean, I didn't even try to do CPR or anything because this person was so badly beat up that it would have been pointless. But that incident really stood out in all of our minds as kind of a wake-up call. Everybody felt like we were hot young skiers, film crew, doing our thing. And we debriefed that night and everybody was in shock. I mean, and I think it's a story that if you interviewed any of those people that were there that day, they would share the same emotional intensity. It was really, really scary. And we were really lucky, but also we did consciously make a good decision to pull the plug and get into that safe zone. And I feel really bad for that young snowboarder that lost his life and the photographer who is still in the industry who was there with those guys. So yeah, that was global storming, 1999.
Some heavy shit, man. Is that the end of when everything becomes cowboy, when it's not all about just getting rad, it's more about getting home as well?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that was a little bit of a turning point in terms of taking things seriously. And I had already done my Airy Avalanche level 2. And so like I had some knowledge.
You were way ahead of the curve though, too, because no one else was doing it that way.
Yeah, people, especially pro skiers weren't really doing that. But I was really interested in it from my mountaineering background or whatever. But I didn't have the experience, especially in terms of international destinations and different types of snowpacks and different things. But, we were kind of trial by fire. We were getting that education by just being out there. But that was a serious wake up call. And I know it scarred everybody because it was just like, holy shit, we just saw our first avalanche fatality right in front of our faces.
I mean, seeing a dead body, period, is scary as shit. Doing what you do on a regular basis and seeing someone die and then realizing that shit's real, it's not just something that people talk about.
No, I mean, I've had to deal with it a couple times now. I've been on some other fatalities, not in groups that I was with, but just I happened to be nearby. And as a professional, I was like a rescuer,
Yeah.
It's never a good thing. It's a terrible thing. But it's also like, as I said, like as a professional, it's like your responsibility to try to help in any way you can. I was filming with Warren Miller one time with pro skier Jess McMillan. She's from Jackson Hole. We were filming down in the San Juan Mountains near Telluride. And same kind of thing. I had a big snowstorm. We're out the next day, had an epic morning filming when it was cold and the sun was out and we pulled the plug and Jess and I were sitting at the bottom of a big run, feeling really good about what we had filmed that morning and talking about, I think we're kind of done. It's getting warm. No sooner than had we said that, then the radio crackled and it was the heli pilot saying, "Hey, I just got a call from 911, there's been an avalanche over the ridge. I'm going to come pick you up and drop you guys as first responders because you're the closest." We're like, okay, holy shit, let's go. Let's do it. And the heli came down and Jess and I got in and we flew up and came over this ridge and saw the crown of the avalanche and went, oh no, like this is not good. This isn't going to be survivable. And we saw the 2 or 3 partners of this person who was caught. The partners were searching through the debris, which was, this was like a massive like R3, D3 avalanche. It ran over a mile and we raced down the debris and one of the partners had found his friend and sort of began digging him out. He was definitely deceased, but wasn't really as beat up as like this other person that I had been on. And so Jess and I did CPR on this guy for like a half an hour before another helicopter came in with like the professional rescue squad from Telluride and we were able to step aside. But it was just like, okay, well, we were in that place at that time. So it was our responsibility to help. And my wife actually was in Telluride at the hotel. And when we didn't arrive back, she was like, that's weird. Wonder where they are. And then she was like walking by the heli office in the hotel and heard someone say, oh yeah, there's been an avalanche. There's a rescue going on. So she was like panicked that it was us. Yeah, that was another scary one. I mean, those things happen, Mike, it's not a matter of if, it's when. If you spend your life in the backcountry and you're out there a lot, you're going to see things. And not only have I been on those incidents, which I just described, but I've been in a couple avalanches myself and they were my fault. They were bad decisions. They were me stepping on the gas pedal for films, that Kodak courage, like I want to get the shot. And I made decisions that I would never make if I was skiing with, friends or family or clients. And it took me some years to realize that was my most vulnerable moment. And that's kind of why I stopped filming, because I just felt like that was where I was most at risk. And that's why nowadays I love guiding, because I can push other people's boundaries, but be totally within my own. And when I'm filming, I was pushing my own boundaries, and that was really dangerous.
And I think it's someone's age, it plays a big role into it too. In your 20s, you have a lot less to live for. Not saying you have a lot less to live for, really, but it's not like you have kids. You're all about getting her at, and that's what people want to see out of you. And you don't even think about the consequences, although you might think about them more because you just have a lot more together about you, I think, upstairs, and maybe others, I don't know, maybe I'll edit that out. Who knows? But then you get older and you want to minimize risk a little bit. But through these movies and through what Matchstick does, you become a household name in the ski business. And that has to be a pretty cool feeling. You know, 1 year you're working, setting gates, and then 2-3 years later, you go to any ski town in the world and people know who you are because there's only a handful of guys that are being seen in the movies at that point. Is it cool to just feel that working wherever you go, that like you are somebody now?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it is cool from sort of a selfish perspective, like that you become, I mean, somewhat famous within our small little bubble. But I think the thing that I really enjoyed was like I was able to make a living. I created a business for myself that was doing great. And that made me really proud. And that's something I never took for granted. I always worked hard to kind of keep that going. And yeah, I mean, it was fun showing up in, you know, you'd show up in some resort in the Alps and see like a billboard of yourself. You'd be like, oh my God, that's so cool. Or wherever it might be, or ads in magazines, or, you know, the films and all those kind of things, and building a fan base with which you can then leverage for your sponsors and with the consumers. I mean, that business side of it, I always really enjoyed, like, say, you know, okay, we've got this new Kastle ski. I'm going to reach out to all of my fans and like, we're going to sell some product, man. We're going to like do some business. Or like, you know, in starting my ski camps that I've done here in Aspen and in Portillo, Chile, and other places, sharing that wealth of knowledge and experience. And I say wealth of knowledge and experience. I'm still a student. I'm still learning every single day, and I'll never stop learning. I feel like I'm getting my PhD in the mountains, but I'm never actually going to graduate. Right. You know, you just kind of keep learning. But with that said, it doesn't mean you can't be teaching too and educating. And yeah, I love that part of it. Yeah, but there was definitely a few years, and we talked about the movie tours back in the first episode, where it felt kind of rock star-ish, which was pretty fun. And I look back on it now and I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know, we had so much freedom, and I had money and didn't have kids yet, and I could just travel all season long. And my wife was super supportive and always there for me. And those were amazing years. It'll never be like that again. I mean, I don't think that the ski industry will ever be like that again.
No, times have definitely changed. But with the risk level that you're at with MSP, by 2004, you have a wife and 2 kids, or you're close to having 2 kids at that point. Is there any pressure at home to reel it back in a little bit? Or is it still like your wife just trusts that you're going to make the right decisions?
Yeah, there was certainly conversations. She never put pressure on me, bless her heart. It was always just kind of conversational. But by 2004 and 5, I'd won 2 world championships, and you know, the competition stuff and the films and all that was going great. But I'd had a couple job offers in Aspen from like real estate and from a financial services firm. And I'm kind of like, okay, that's interesting. Maybe the money would be good. And, you know, my wife was like, hey, that's stability. That could be really good. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. She's like always right, of course.
Right.
And then a funny story is in 2005, in the fall of, I mean, right about now in 2005, so 15 years ago, I was out on a mountain bike ride, and I was kind of thinking about the coming season and what I wanted to do. And at the time, like, I was kind of feeling a little jaded. I'd been doing the films and the contest for 10 years, and it kind of felt like same old formula. And I was looking for something else, like what's going to separate Chris Davenport from the pack of other pro skiers out there? What can I do differently? And as I'm like riding along, I have this like epiphany, and the word 14ers pops into my head. And I start thinking about like the Colorado 14ers, of course, refers to the 14,000 foot peaks of Colorado. I'd been getting more and more into backcountry and mountaineering. And I rode back to my house and stepped off the bike and went into the house. And I was like, Jess, I have this great idea. I know what I'm going to do this winter. And she's like lighting up, like all excited, like I'm going to take that job with the bank or whatever it was. And I'm like, I'm going to try to climb and ski all the 54 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado this winter in spring. And she, like, her jaw like hit the floor. She was like, what? I thought you were trying to minimize your risk, reduce your risk. Like, I thought we talked about this. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I know. Damn. And so I kind of deferred to her, but I couldn't get that out of my head for the next couple of weeks. And I secretly started calling Red Bull and others and like telling them what this idea was, and nobody got it. People were like, what? You're going to try to like, because it wasn't a thing. Like nobody was doing projects in the backcountry or in the mountains.
You were like the first big athlete project.
Yeah. And actually Red Bull still holds up that 14ers project as kind of this exemplary sort of thing, the way it was done anyway. And that was a transformative moment where I could have gone either way. I could have stepped out of being a professional skier and into the real world, but I chose to do the opposite. I chose to pivot and actually shift into an even higher gear as a professional skier and take it to a whole new level. I didn't know that it would succeed. There was a lot of risk there, both physical risk of being in the mountains, but also I would say reputational and professional risk.
People must have thought you were crazy. You were with MSP filming for arguably the biggest movie company in the world, and you're expected to be in that movie every year, and you walk away. Douglas walks away at the same time, it seems like. And that's a pretty heavy deal. I mean, those guys must have been like, dude, what are you thinking, Dab? Are you fucking crazy? Like, you are in the right spot. Because those guys are the puppet masters at that point. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to be my own puppet master.
I actually did film with Matchstick that year. I took a couple weeks off from the 14ers project to go do another movie shoot, 06, 07. But that was 06 was the year Doug Coombs died. And I'll never forget, like, I had been out skiing 14ers that day. I'd skied 2 peaks and I had that was like early cell phones. I came back and like, or maybe not early cell phones, but I came out of the mountains and got cell service, and my old Nokia shitty cell phone lit up with like 25 text messages. And I was like, whoa, what just happened? And so that was a pretty reflective moment, because I sort of held him up as somebody who couldn't die, would never make a mistake. He was the ninja master, you know?
I would think your 2 Supermans were Shane and him.
Yeah. And when it happened to Doug, I was like, okay, I really have to look at what I'm doing. And am I crazy? Am I going to just end up like that and leave 2 kids without a dad? And so I had to kind of have a reckoning with myself. And when I came out of that, I realized that I was doing what I was meant to be doing. I was following my passion, and Doug would have wanted me to keep at it, but just in a more professional way. And not that I was reckless by any means, but I started taking it even more seriously. And that 14ers project was transformative for my career. It reinvigorated my passion for skiing in the mountains. It made a bunch of my sponsors sort of take notice. And we began with Salomon developing some backcountry gear. I mean, it began the development of proper backcountry skiing and ski mountaineering equipment in the United States.
It blows up. At this point, there weren't that many, like we said, no athlete projects. So when you start documenting this thing on your blog or whatever you're doing, are you seeing millions of people come to your site and think, I mean, that might not be millions, but it's a lot of numbers in the beginning, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly not millions, but I'm getting great traffic. People are reading my blogs about the 14ers. People are following along. And it's kind of one of the first, obviously before social media, but it was an early way that you could actually follow something day by day and week by week. So yeah, it was really cool. That Ski the 14ers website was awesome. And then once I finished the project, which was right up there, well, even ahead of any of the competition wins or things that I had, that finishing that project was one of my greatest achievements. And when I skied peak number 54, Long's Peak, and got to the bottom in one piece, I like clicked out of my skis and knelt down on the snow and literally was in tears. Like, oh my God, I actually pulled this off. Like, wow. And came back to Aspen, and a bunch of friends in town threw a huge like congratulations party. There was like a couple hundred people in this bar, and we raged, and it was awesome. And that led to an incredible speaking tour, slideshows. I wrote my first book, Ski the 14ers. That book sold 10,000 copies of a big coffee table book at $50. It was like amazing. And actually I took a young upstart skier on I did a slideshow tour with a bunch of REI stores on the East Coast and West Coast, and had a young future pro skier along with me. I was showing him the ropes. His name was Cody Townsend.
Huh.
That was pretty cool. And so, yeah, that just had a life of its own. It was unbelievable. And I was like scratching my head like, okay, like these mountaineering projects are resonating. They're real. And it sort of opened like a whole new chapter of my career, which, you know, as an individual athlete and professional skier, you need to be able to pivot and evolve and change over time. You can't just do this one thing for 20 years or 30 years or whatever. So that was one of those pivots. And it's led to, another 15, 16 years of awesome pro skiing and another book, 50 Classic Ski Descents of North America, of which Cody is now taken on as his project to try to climb and ski all 50 of the peaks that I wrote about in that book.
Yep.
And then a lot of other mountaineering projects, from the Himalayas and guiding and skiing on Mount Everest to skiing all the volcanoes, the Pacific Northwest in a fast period of time, to now here in Colorado skiing the 100 highest mountains in the state. We call them the Centennial Peaks. And now that stands up as something that hasn't been repeated yet. So like I said, when I told the story of being out on that mountain bike ride in the fall of 2005, it was an epiphany, and it struck me, and I couldn't shake it. And then I went after it, and gosh, I sit here looking back. I mean, I can't believe it was 2006 that I did that project, but it was amazing.
And it was a game-changing project in the ski industry and for your career. Like you said, it paved the way for you to do project after project after project, where you never really have to compete or do anything again except for beat Chris Davenport and do the things that you like to do, which is pretty sick because that's the dream for any pro skier.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't rest on your laurels, and it's not like anyone's making a ton of money in this sport. So I feel like I have to continue being creative and coming up with new ways to do things, because especially now, this particular year with COVID and everything, it's the time to kind of rethink how we look at the sports of skiing and snowboarding and resorts and backcountry and education and all of these things. It's a real critical time for our industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think based on what we saw with what happened in the spring and summer of people just getting into individual sports, you couldn't buy a bike anywhere because they were all sold out. Couldn't buy a paddleboard. You couldn't buy a lot of individual sport type things. But going into winter, a lot of people are going to be getting into the backcountry. Does that scare you at all? Because there's going to be a lot of people that don't have the education needed to really go where they're going to go, but they're going to go anyway. And do you think we're going to see a big year for backcountry and a big year for incidents?
Yes. Yeah, we are. And I wouldn't say I'm scared as much as I feel a real burden of responsibility to get the word out. And we've already started doing that this fall. With the Colorado Avalanche Information Center last week, we had a pledge campaign where you would pledge to get the forecast every day and challenge some other pro athletes to share this pledge as well. The American Institute for Avalanche Research and Education, AIRI, the course provider, they've ramped up all of their education efforts and courses. And I was checking in with a couple of our retailers here locally that serve the backcountry community, and they are already exceeding every record that they've ever set in terms of backcountry sales. Like August and September, they're already, selling through their products, and you're not going to be able to get any more because nobody was prepared for this. Just like the bike industry wasn't prepared this summer, the ski industry was not prepared for the sales that we are already seeing right now. And this is in September. And so, yeah, it's up to the professionals in the industry. It's up to the manufacturers. It's up to the resorts. It's up to the avalanche forecast centers to really make sure that they ramp up their messaging and their communication around backcountry travel and responsible usage, and know before you go, having good partners, getting all the information you can. This is something that I take very seriously. I mean, typically in Colorado, we'll have 6 or 7 avalanche fatalities every season, and that's just unacceptable. And I think this year we run the risk with increased volume, especially with new users and people that don't have experience, of having a really terrible year when it comes to avalanche fatalities. And I don't want that to happen, nor does anyone else. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that people get the messaging.
Well, that's very important. And sorry, I was not even paying attention to your answer there because I was trying to queue up inappropriate questions. Because you told me last week, or when we talked, which was last week, that Murray Wais would be the worst person I could get to ask you 3 inappropriate questions. So I went and I got Murray Wais to ask some questions. Murray didn't just ask 3, though. He came up with 5. And I was like, Murray, it's a 3-question thing, but you know what? We're going to go with 5. So I'm going to play Murray's first inappropriate question for you right now.
Okay.
So, Chris, tell me what you, Shane McConkey, and Johnny Mosley did to the ranchers' daughters in Tatlioco Lake, British Columbia, that almost got us kicked off the ranch.
Oh, Murray, that's a good question. What did we do to the rancher's daughter? So we were out at Tatlioco Lake in the middle of nowhere in the Coast Range of British Columbia. And holy God, I don't remember. I do remember the owner, Bracewell was his name, getting mad about something, but I don't remember what we did to his daughter, to be honest. But the one thing I do remember there is we were all in, and I'm just going to pivot the question because I don't remember what we did to his daughter, but we basically almost ended the film shoot because we were all in the helicopter and the rotors were spinning in the morning and we're waiting for Christian Pondella, who was just slow, to get out to the heli so we could take off. And he comes hauling out to the helicopter with his skis up on his shoulder. And the pilot's like, oh my God, he's going to hit the blades with his skis. And so the pilot pulls the emergency brake and breaks the transmission of the helicopter. Oh. And so we were down for 3 days while we had to have a new transmission flown in to fix the machine. Think how Christian Pondella felt. And I am sorry, Murray, that I cannot remember. Maybe I just blacked it out of my memory, whatever we did. It wasn't my fault. It was definitely Mosley.
Okay, we'll leave that on Johnny, and we'll go to question number 2.
When we arrived in Juneau, Alaska to go ski at Tulsaquah, and we learned that the Canadian border was closed due to the events around 9/11, what did we do to get into the Tulsaquah Lodge?
Yeah, that was obviously after the events of 9/11, and that was in September, obviously. This is the following spring, so it would have been the spring of 2002. We flew to Juneau, but we couldn't cross the border to get into Canada. But the gold mining camp that we were going to base ourselves out of was in Canada. So we actually flew up the Tulsaquah River, landed on this like beach on the edge of the river, and got out with all of our gear. And the helicopter took off and went back to Juneau, and we sat there in the like a total wilderness. And then a helicopter from Canada came in. We walked across this 100-foot border, whatever. It's not a border; it's just a river. And the helicopter picked us up, and we were in Canada totally illegally for like 2 weeks.
The things you do for ski movies.
Yep.
Question number 3.
Can you tell me what the Aspen mating call is?
What is the Aspen mating call? Is it something like where the beer flows like wine and the women instinctively flock like the salmon of Capistrano? I have no idea.
No, I think it was like tapping the credit card on the window or something like that, he was saying. But we'll go to question number 4.
How come you never embraced gangster ski culture and the street skiing scene?
Did you ever ski on twin tips?
Yes. I never embraced gangster ski culture because I got to hang around with a bunch of real gangsters. I was with C.R. Johnson and Evan Rapps and Tanner Hall and Rory Bushfield and a bunch of thugs in the early days. And so I could just be with them and it would all rub off on me. And yes, I did ski on twin tips. I had Salomon 1080s. I used to love skiing the pipe, actually. I wasn't ever really one for hitting huge kickers and doing tricks, but I did like half pipe skiing, and I had a good 540 and some alley-oops and things in the pipe. But yeah, that was something that was a little bit younger than me, but definitely got to spend plenty of time with. And I'll never forget being at the X Games at Mount Snow in the Red Bull house, and they had just signed a young 15-year-old Tanner Hall. So he was there smoking a gigantic spleef, and who was DJing and singing in the corner, but Eminem.
No
in
way.
Our Red Bull house. Oh, yeah. And my room was upstairs in the house where my stuff was. And after we were partying downstairs, I turned to go upstairs, and there's this big bouncer dude standing at the stairs. He's like, "You can't come up here." I'm like, "My room's up there. What are you talking about?" He's like, "Eminem's up here. You can't come up." I'm like, "Dude, this is my house." So that's about as gangster as I ever got.
Dude, that's street cred right there. We're going to go with this final inappropriate question.
When we were filming in Selkirk when Shane McConkey died, what do you remember about that trip?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's like, that's one of those time stamps in life that you never forget where you were, whether it was where Doug Coombs died or where you were during 9/11, or maybe we'll remember what happened when COVID hit. But Matchstick Crew at Selkirk Wilderness, cat skiing. Murray was filming. And we had been out shredding that day. I think it was like a Helly Hansen kind of sponsored film shoot. And we came back to the lodge, and for some reason, Murray was back there before me, but I'll never forget walking into the ski room and seeing Murray and just seeing the look on his face. And I knew immediately something had happened. And he turned to me and he could barely speak. And he's like, Shane's gone. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I get choked up even telling the story. But I mean, we all ended up getting fucked up that night and crying like I hadn't cried like that in a long time, and probably I haven't since.
Yeah.
It was, that one particularly, and I've lost a lot of friends in the mountains over the years, but that one was definitely the hardest that I've ever dealt with. But I was grateful to be around the Matchstick crew. We were all together and we could support each other. We had each other, and we were feeling for Steve Winter and JT, who were over in Italy, who had been there with Shane that day. And yeah, that was a tough one. Yeah. But Murray, thanks, buddy. Thanks. Love you.
Yeah, thanks for ending this on a positive note, Murray. Not really. Jesus Christ, you had a great podcast, and then you just had to end it on such a downer. But that's what happens, man. There's so much risk in what you do. And you were saying something earlier about part of your job is being in shape, but another part of your job is the risk that you have, like where you can die in the mountains at any time. Where with my job, I have carpal tunnel as a risk. I have, throat problems as a risk talking. But really, those are things that I expect to be a risk. But in your world, your risks are way different, and you've been able to manage those risks over 30 years now to be able to create some amazing life and times for yourself, for your family, and you're still here to tell the tale. So it's an amazing thing. And I love this interview, dude. I love talking to you. It's an amazing one. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, Mike, I appreciate the opportunity. It brings back so many great memories reflecting on a career that has been and will be in the future. And I hope we can discuss more stuff down the road, brother. Thank you very much.
So that was time with Chris Davenport, and I love podcasts like this one. I have always been a fan of Dav's, and while I've handed him powder awards when I hosted them and I know almost all of his work, I never got to know Chris. Now I feel like I know him a little bit. Actually, it's weird. Dav, like all my guests, I really felt like I got to know him so much that it's kind of creepy. Especially since he knows nothing about me. But the whole goal is for you to get to know Dav, and hopefully you feel like you know him as a person a little better and you understand his stories and what was going through his head as they happened. That's the podcast for this week. I want to thank you for listening. I want to ask you to rate or review me. To do that on an iPhone, here's what you need to do. Click the podcast icon, search for the Powell Movement. Even if you subscribe, you're going to need to do it this way. When you search, you're going to see my logo. Click on my logo. Scroll down to where you see 5 stars, click 5 stars, and you're done. It's that easy, and it does help the show grow, so please do that for me. I also want to thank my sponsors who make this show happen. They are Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Cole Headwear, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.